Hello, everyone. Welcome to my Black is Transnational, and I have on here today the pleasure of talking with someone that I've been meaning to talk to and never thought I actually would get the opportunity to talk with. So it's been a great pleasure to have on here sports media mogul.
I don't tell
Am I reaching, bro? Nah.
that.
To me, someone that I've listened to. I mean, since what 2015, you've been in it doing 670. And I've been listening to 670 since I've been 11. So, seeing being able to have an opportunity to talk with Tony Gill here, who's the producer for the podcast on NBC Sports, and also the producer for the Ringer, the Full Go podcast. Also, you still sports adjacent.
Still do
Also
that,
as
yep.
well, right? So just, I mean, doing all things podcast, doing all things sports, been, I got a huge following and I'm one of those followers. And so to have the opportunity to have you here and just come on the show in the midst of everything you got going on with pending fatherhood and everything. So thank you so much, Tony, for jumping on the show. Whitney Young and Revis High School alum. And yeah, man, thanks for joining us.
Oh, of course. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah. And so really quickly, I know I just gave you a quick intro, but I always allow my guests to talk a little bit about just themselves, background, right? On my Black is Transnational, we love to talk about your cultural background and experiences as a Black person. And then we'll get deep into the other conversations, especially in regards to your profession and everything like that.
Yeah, so born and raised in Chicago. Southsider, even though I currently reside on the west side.
Okay.
So grew up West Inglewood.
Okay.
Was my neighborhood before we moved. And both my parents raised in the church. Still attend. Church is a big part of my life and what I do and who I am. Huge influences from there. And I just, my father is a big sports guy, and I love sports because of him. Just sitting down, watching, listening to him talk about sports with my uncles or my godfather, where they just get so excited and animated when they're talking about whatever sport it was, basketball, football, baseball. And I would just be able, because I was the oldest. I'm the oldest of four children. I have two younger brothers and a youngest sister. And so I was a part of a lot of adult conversations in terms of just, look, it was just me and my dad for a little bit and just hanging out and just listening to him talk about sports and things of that nature. And it kind of gave me an ear of, oh, this could be fun. Like, this is when I had the most fun with my dad, and to be able to change that and turn that into a career that I have and something that we can forever bond over, me and my dad. It feels good. It feels good knowing that he's proud of me, proud of what I'm doing, and it always is going to connect us in that way. Is sports. So that's kind of just a short summary of my background and where I come from.
Yeah. And so you said Inglewood. Yeah. So I came up on 79th, and so we chatted.
Okay.
So 79th in Indiana. So mom's still there right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so you mentioned growing up and being into sports and your father, your uncles, and your brothers. But like, what was growing up in Inglewood like for you at that time? I mean, other than sports maybe being an escape, but like, what was it like for you, being in that community, born and raised?
It's maybe I had a little bit of a different growing up period in West Inglewood because when my grandfather, he started our church right there on 61st and Marshfield, so in between Marshfield and Ashland. And they have been there for already 30 years or so. Everybody knows me, so it's like I couldn't get in too much trouble because everybody knew my grandfather. So any trouble that I would get into, or almost got into, people like, I know your granddad, so that would kind of stop me from doing any any malfeasance or causing mischief around the neighborhood. But I loved it. It was a fun time. It was relatively small neighborhood. And we live right next door to the church, right off on 61st and Ashland. So I mean, we had a lot of good times there. Learn how to ride my bike. That neighborhood. Many trips to the corner stores. Um, it was fun. We stayed there until I was in the fourth grade.
Okay.
Before we end up moving to like 79th and St. Louis.
Okay.
Uh, before we moved there, and then I moved over there after that. But the church is still there. I'm still constantly over in that neighborhood, working in the community. Doing things like that. So that strip of West Inglewood, and I know it's not like it's still the western parts of Inglewood, what traditional Inglewood was, but man, that street, that area is always going to be a part of me, and what made me the man I am today. It makes you to be a little bit streetwise, right? You got to know what's going on, and always be looking around to see
head on a swivel, bro.
What's the next move? And and it's not that you're worried about people, but you always want to be aware of your situations and surroundings, and being able to pick that up fairly early from a young age, and then the life lessons that good father is supposed to teach a young man growing up in Chicago. You get to know about how the world works, and even though you're in the area, you may be a little bit more privileged than others, because I grew up in a household both parents, and a very involved father. So I knew a lot of my friends at that time. A lot of people didn't have that privilege, and on top of that, just more involved grandparents on both sides, and living next door to your grandparents. Like, how many people get that opportunity? It's a blessing, and I don't take it for granted. Especially now with a child on the way for me. The involvement of grandparents and people and family being that available to you, despite of what neighborhood you live in, is so valuable, and it's so key to growing up. And I'm a success because of their teachings and their love and their care. And I knew that played a vital part in how I grew up. And I knew, and I know now that everybody from Inglewood and West Inglewood may not have that same privilege, and I understand that, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah. And I mean, when you talk about family and being able to have that some people consider it a luxury, right? Being able to have your parents available, grandparents, that support system, that village, right? And that was one of the reasons we moved back to Chicago. Just moved back from upstate New York, from Syracuse, because the kids got 3 kids, and pandemic really emphasized and just really pronounced how much we need to be around that village, that support system down the street, compared to being able to just have your kids be able to grow up and know their grandparents and be involved and build that relationship. And it really allows them to also tap into their lineage, their roots to a certain extent, right? To kind of understand a piece of just who they are, built in based on your family. You can be able to talk to your grandpa about how your dad was when he was younger, your age, and you can kind of understand why certain things, why the apple doesn't always fall that far from the tree, right? Like, I'm gonna tell you real quick, like, and I'll get back into my point, but like, my dad was here visiting from Nigeria, and this was the first time in like 5 years since the pandemic. He hasn't seen his grandkids. This is the first time he got to see his grandbabies and everything. But I also had an opportunity to interview and sit down and just talk with him, because it's been years. And it was very interesting to just talk with him about what life, like what was happening in the moment that like I was born. Like, what were you doing? What happened? Right. For him to tell me that story of like, man, I was at work and I get a call and, I hear your mom's doing this and that. And, you're 3 a.m, I see you, and then starting to hear little mannerisms. Cause like my youngest daughter, she's like very loud crier, just very like a banshee, bro, like just very loud and shrieky, like cry, right? And compared to like my son, like, who's not really like that, but I was telling him like, man, what was I like? And he was like, you more like your little girl, like you cry, very annoying. And I was like, dang, like that's the apple don't fall that far. Like you can see it as karma, right? And so I would have never. Some people don't get that opportunity to find that out. You know what I mean? And so just in that point, I think about your up. Like, what have you been able to learn growing up? It seems like West Inglewood and your grandfather making that a foundational piece of the Gill family. What were you able to learn growing up about your history, your lineage as a black man, as a black person growing up? Were you able to get an opportunity to learn about your past, like where your peoples were from and your history behind that?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't go back that far. My grandfather on my father's side, he didn't know his real father.
Mm.
He knew that his father was in the army, and that was it. Everything he had known from his father was a mix of pieced information that he got from his mother, his uncle, not his blood uncle, but his aunt's husband, um, and just some information from his grandparents who he had stayed with briefly. His grandparents on his mother's side. So his family was more of his history was more of the what you get from lineage of American black slaves, right?
Yeah.
Where homes weren't necessarily put together. So his dad and his mom, they weren't. I don't think they were together or anything. And he found out his father had passed uh, because he was shot by a man who found out that my grandfather's father, was seeing her, was seeing that man's wife.
Yeah.
And he shot him, and he could have patched himself together since he was in the army. He knew how to, patch himself up, but he stood over him and watched him bleed out. Until he passed away. And my grandfather was definitely a one of one where he had every excuse in the book to not be the upstanding man that he was, but he didn't. He gave his life to Jesus Christ, and that changed his pathway forward like forever. Through the church, he met my grandmother because she was in the church. They got married. Then they moved to Detroit, where they had my aunt. And then after, job opportunities, they were part of that great migration. Job opportunities began to kind of swallow up in Detroit. He moved them to Chicago, where they had more children. My dad is the youngest of 8. And he wasn't really supposed to be born. They told my grandmother after 7 that if you had another, that not only will the baby die, but you would die as well. But my grandmother had her personal relationship with the Lord as well, and she felt that she wanted to have another one, and thank God she did, because I would not be here.
Yeah.
So they had my father. And here I am. So that's kind of a short history from my father's lineage.
And this was all in like
down to
this was
where I
all in the
am.
Midwest, or was this like where they like out in the South and they migrated up
Yeah,
north?
yeah. So they were in Mississippi.
Mississippi.
Mississippi was where I'm originally from, on both sides actually.
Okay.
My parents, my grandparents on my mother's side, they're from Mississippi as well.
Okay.
So as you get older, you learn more and more of your family's history, good and bad. And as you would know and imagine, a lot of trauma and a lot of pathways that intersect to create where you come from. And I'm slowly learning all of those things as we get older. They're very difficult to piece together the trauma and the history that makes up your family from the older generation. One, right, because it's difficult to talk about sometimes. Um, and two, people aren't ready just yet to discuss until you're of age. And I'm in my 30s now, so I deserve a little bit of respect. And when I ask a question about some history or something like that, like I'm looking for a straight answer. I'm not a child anymore. Like I can handle things. So learning all your family history may not come at once, being a product of slavery and sharecroppers and things of that nature, but you slowly piece it together and you learn and you grow more, and that way you can pass it down to the next generation. So you don't become uppity, or you always remain humble because you come from humble beginnings.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you said Mississippi. My wife, her family, I think her mom, my mother-in-law, all the way back to I think it's Yazoo, Mississippi, and then my father-in-law is Alabama. I forgot exactly where in Alabama. I want to say it starts with a P, but I don't want to say the wrong thing, but yeah. So no, so it's interesting because when my wife and I very similar, like having these conversations, you learn so much the older you get about your roots, right? And so it's to learn so much about your history and blackness and being African American, or and the history tied to slavery. I'm curious as to then when your first exposure was to African immigrants who were not necessarily the descendants of slaves, but like newly fresh immigrants in your area, because it wasn't, I mean, I don't know, growing up, like in a lot of us were up north in the north side, and then we kind of found our way to the south later on as far as like African immigrants go. But I want to know when your first like experience was interacting with like a Nigerian or Ghanaian or someone from Belize or wherever the case may be. Like, what was your first experience growing up doing that?
I wasn't exposed to an African immigrant until I moved out of West Englewood to the Ashburn area. I think this was what that small area is called. It's like a small area between like 79th and Kedzie. Like it's on along Southwest Highway, but between like 79th and Kedzie and Cicero. Like it's a very small area.
Yeah.
Like around, if anybody knows Bogan High School, that's kind of where that area is. I wasn't introduced until we moved over there, and I had a library teacher. Her name was Mrs. Wambugu. And she was a first. She wasn't a first generation. She moved over here with her husband from Africa. I can't remember what part of Africa where she was from, but that was my first kind of interaction with a Black person that wasn't American Black.
Yeah.
She was very poignant, very detailed. She was about her studies and wanted to show the importance of books. Even though she didn't really get the chance or opportunity, really, because you got a lot of different people from different backgrounds and different attention spans and of an elementary school setting. So, but she had two children that also attended the school, and I, at least in part from, I didn't, it's not like I had this like great relationship with her, but she was my first kind of interaction with a person of true African origin that knew where she came from. And she was she was proud of that. She was proud of where she came from, and especially around Black History Month time, she was able to show and tell us at least in some part where where she came from and how she grew up. So that was kind of my first interaction with that.
Were there any like familiar perceptions, like as far as like what your family perceived when you would talk with them or in the church? If were there any perceptions about African immigrants or people who were originally from Africa and how they were viewed when you were growing up? Did you hear anything, any rumors, any type of stereotypes, anything like that?
Not really, or not anyone that I can remember. Yeah, I mean, not really, not really. Just to be honest, because we didn't have that many interactions
Right.
um, with people of true African descent,
Yeah.
direct African descent, I should probably say. Um, and I don't know. I mean, you did have like I would did have questions if my father, knew of someone. But it wasn't like a real a point of conversation in my house or anything. That, to me, I just kind of, well, they may be from somewhere else, but they're black like me.
Mhm.
They gotta deal with all the stuff that I gotta deal with. I truly didn't get a true sense of or had a real connection with it until I got to high school with Whitney Young. There was so many different people
They're
from so
there.
many different backgrounds that you had to. Like one of my friends, his name was Sean Kwamwa.
Mm.
Uh, his family was from Africa, and there were other different people there where they were just the same as me. Trying to find their way in that space of high school life, and um, very well spoken and all other things that everybody else is trying to do. So I didn't really have a really true connection or conversation with somebody from Africa until I got to high school.
Yeah. No, the reason I asked that is just because for me, like coming up, I'm gonna assume we're about the same age. But or at least in the same generation. But like for me coming up, being a young African immigrant, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until later. For me, I was able to adjust a little bit better than some of my other peers who were, African immigrants or even children of, because my accent wasn't thick then. Like I was able to
Mm-hmm.
code switch, right? And so for me, it was cool. But once you hear my name, once you see my tires sometimes, or
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of put the pieces together. But there used to be a tension, bro. Like there was a tension that was very palpable among like Black immigrants and African Americans in terms of we don't mess with them because they are looked upon as not good, right?
Mm-hmm.
The association of the negative perceptions of hip hop culture that was put in front of a lot of African first generation African immigrants who came here, how they perceived
Mm-hmm.
Black people was not necessarily the most positive light based on how media portrayed them. And so for me coming up, it was also reversed in terms of how we were perceived as Africans. This perception of us living in huts and
Mm-hmm.
lions and jungles and all those things. Have you ever heard the term African booty scratcher?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So like all those, right, which these are things that you was just like, man, like, okay, what's happening here?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't realize it either. I was very similar to you, where I was like, okay, we're all Black, we're all doing the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
we're all trying to make it, eat to live, and
Right.
just try to do our thing. It was for me, I had to, I didn't notice the intentional, and I don't know if it's from your end intentional, but for us, there was a little bit of an intentional separation and distancing, right, from
Mm-hmm.
one culture to another. And so I used to always feel that, man, like if we just took some time to get to know one another, it'd be cool. And as I got older, of course, I started to do more things independently. But I wouldn't, even when I was younger, I had to go out of my way to really immerse myself in Black history, right?
Mm-hmm.
And reading books and really learning about the path, because the assumption was, right, African Americans are lazy, right? Because we come to this country as African immigrants, and we see you all are sitting here doing drugs, making music, doing all these things. We're coming here to work hard and take advantage of the opportunities that y'all not, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a message that was embedded in me initially, coming up. But once I learned about Black history and you really understood like the things that were in place, it really opened my eyes, but a lot of others didn't. And I was curious about what your thoughts are regarding these different stereotypes and perceptions that each group lay on one another. And do you think what is your opinion on that?
Um, well, I mean, I didn't have, um, let's say it's like I'm not gonna like pretend like I knew like that tension was there growing up. I had no idea.
Yeah.
To be honest. But obviously, in my adulthood, you look back on it and you think about, okay, what there are differences, right? Um, from different in confidence, right? You're confident when you know where you come from, right? Where you know your history and it's built in. There's a pride there that comes with that, and from the people here um, that are products of slaves. Um, for everybody that doesn't already know the history, I guess it would cast a. We just look at the current state of situation. You would have a lot of assumptions
Mm-hmm.
about Black people in America and their circumstances. But there are, you're right, there are reasons why that is. There are reasons why we are where we are today um, as a group.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, right, we've come a long way, right? We got millionaires and a couple billionaires, around, athletes, musicians, um, actors, like educators. Like we've definitely, come a long way, but um, I guess my hope is since there's been more conversation around, especially of late, the last couple presidencies,
Mm-hmm.
that there's been, more understanding. I shouldn't even say understanding because Florida, they just are trying to just outright not teach it at all.
Florida is
But
like Florida different, bro.
that does tell me that people do know of the information,
Mm-hmm.
of the truth, and at that point, they're just trying to deny the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So the truth is still getting out there, and people are still wanting to know because there are people that don't want the truth,
Mm-hmm.
in there. So
Mm-hmm.
that's still a reaction to to history.
Yeah.
And I hope that the people and not so much the establishments, but the people really continue to pass down um, information and pass down history, real life history, so people can be more understanding,
Yeah.
going forward. So
Yeah. I mean, it's just crazy because I think about even as you were describing your upbringing, I think about my perception is, man, like you kind of lived in a fairly insulated environment in terms of
it,
what's
yeah.
happening. Yeah. So like
Mm-hmm,
imagine, right? And saying my wife, she literally
mm-hmm,
told me I hadn't seen or interacted with my first African immigrant until med school. Like
mm-hmm,
that's incredible, right? You've gone 18 plus years of your life and not really knowing that there's another Black person that looks like you that may have these new like minor cultural differences or may perceive
mm-hmm,
themselves as a different type of Black than you, right? And
mm-hmm.
so as you're about to become a dad, man, and I wonder, so what are you going to tell your kid in terms of their history, in terms of, because I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I assume, I remember from our talking
Mm-hmm.
before, it's going to be a multicultural background, right? If I
Yeah.
recall.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so like, that's interesting for you. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to know like how you're going to, break that down when
Mm-hmm.
your kid is going to come to you, just like you went to your OGs and them and say, hey, like, who am I? Where am I from?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be interesting. My daughter will be the first person of mixed culture in our immediate family on my side. And I think it's gonna be I think it's gonna be fun, and getting to explain to her that she has so much history and so much culture inside of her, from her mom and her dad, uh, that she can fully embrace.
Mhm.
She doesn't have to pick, one or the other. Like, she has both Black and Indian culture in her. Um, and me and my wife, we, before we got married, I mean, it was part of our discussion, right? And it has to be, um, because that's who we are, right? I'm proud of where I am and where I come from and my family and my roots, and she is as well. Uh, we come from both loving homes with loving parents and loving siblings and cousins, and all these different and traditions, right? Like, that she gets to experience, all together and all at once on equal standing. Um, and it's going to be great to embrace all of those things, that is her. Um, and I think she's gonna have a great. I, I'm just projecting, but I think she's gonna have a pretty fun life and pretty great life, because there's gonna be so much family and love around her from both cultures.
Yeah. So are you like your wife is where's your wife originally from?
She's from here. Her parents are immigrants from Hyderabad,
Oh, okay.
India. Hmm.
India. So is she still are they still heavily connected to India as well?
Yeah, yeah. They have land over there. They have family
Yeah.
there, that visit. They've recently gone back earlier this year for my brother-in-law, um, who's from India as well. So yeah, they're very much heavily connected. My wife wants us to go, wanted us to go, but the baby kind of set us back a little bit.
Yeah.
Probably set us back a year, but I plan to go, eventually, to see her family that's still over there. So yeah, they're very very much still connected to where they're from.
Yeah, man. And so your daughter is gonna be a transnational in her own right.
Hmm.
It's connected to
Yeah.
India and going back and forth because the mom is still connected. So I
Hmm.
wonder for you, like, what is your interest level as far as connecting with Africa or leaving any country in the diaspora?
Um, it's funny. My wife really, because she knows where she's from,
Mhm.
and she takes ownership of that, and is happy and proud of that. And I am as well of where I'm come from, but I just don't know exactly where that is. I am happy with my present amount of information that I have. Where I know I didn't start in Mississippi, but for all intents and purposes, that's where my
Started.
family
That's where you
started,
started. Yeah.
was Mississippi, and then we know what happened from there, how they got there.
Yeah.
Uh, but she wants me to do the genealogy background test, and I've been kind of slow footing around it. But I think I may do it, eventually, just so I can see that information and be able to have that. And because in all honesty, it is important, um, to know. She knows. She's also did the test despite knowing already, where she. So it's really important.
That's the final line.
And all right, and for our daughter, it is going to be important for her to know. That answer may not be good enough for her.
Mm.
Where it's like, hey, we from Mississippi. That may not she may want to know more because she knows so much on her mother's side. So um, yeah, so because of all those things, more recently I become more interested in my African roots more than before, just because when you are kind of focused just on being successful, or making a stable life for yourself or for your family, those things kind of tend to kind of go by the wayside,
Yeah.
because of day-to-day life, and wanting to provide, and all these other things that it becomes, less important. And on top of, right, like, do I really want to go back to and learn the traumas of my relatives from back in the day, or relive that? And I don't know if I was mature enough or strong enough to handle that information, knowing what's back there.
Yeah.
Right, knowing what I'm gonna have to wade through the waters of that information. It's tough. It's tough, and it's just easier. And honestly, it's just easier just to not look, and go on with your life and try and make the best life you can for your family today. But I know that eventually, I'm going to be more diving into, maybe when I retire or something, that will be a focus of mine, of just trying to truly do a deep dive. But I will say I'm now with my daughter coming soon, that I'm that interest engine is definitely revving up.
Yeah. And fatherhood will do that, because you start to think about your legacy, right? And that question is going to come, right? At some point in time, your kid is going to ask you, who am I? Who are we? And what is it? What is it that makes us who we are? But one thing I say, bro, Tony, is I know people are very keen on wanting to find out exactly, and I'll just share my philosophy for the sake of being just being full transparency. I think personally, I just encourage brothers who are curious about going to Africa to just go, like, pick a country and make it yours, if that's something you're interested in. But my thing is, first go and see what it's like for people who look like you, who want to welcome you home, because there are lots of places there. There's Ghana, there's Nigeria. I would definitely say Ghana. Nigeria's a little wild, but Ghana for sure. But Nigeria, I always tell people, go to Ghana first. Like for example, right? We talking about Inglewood. If people visiting from Chicago, most people, you be like, go to Inglewood first. You probably be like, you might want to check out like Avenue. Go to Michigan Avenue first and see what that's kind of how I look at Nigeria. Like, go to Ghana, Accra first. They're definitely more tourist friendly. But all my point is that, like, historically, it's been one of those things where, again, we as African immigrants, we pick and choose where we want to go and reestablish our lands. And the whole point of this podcast is really about getting people to understand that, like, you have, especially our brothers and sisters who are African Americans, historically, your ancestors were involuntarily brought here. And now you have an opportunity to voluntarily, reconnect back, if you choose to really figure out what's going on. And there's so many, like, really dope things now. Everybody has this thing called, and you can check it out in your free time, like Doorway of Return. And it's a very powerful thing. And it's, even for me, like, it's something that, even though I'm not necessarily African American by identity, but I definitely associate because of my upbringing and my experience and my immersion in history. But, like, to be able to sit and have conversations with people who say, look, man, we're sitting on this beach and I'm looking out of the water, and I realize that, like, the people who are standing next to me, I really don't know. They might actually be my relatives, but I couldn't really tell because of what happened, right? Like, because, and you have to sit there and say that I might. And so we get the chance to welcome somebody that actually really is your kin, right? And these people are welcoming you to say, come, you're home, right? And this is your home. You are welcome. Look at us. We see each other. We embrace each other and say, hey, look, there are opportunities for you. And I think internationally, I want to raise awareness about how valuable African Americans are globally. The impact, like, it's a story, man. And biblical stories, the story of Joseph, right? Like, you understand the coming back with a king, like, if you understand the power of what happened, being sold off, and then to create what African Americans have created, that can the leaders, the moves, the millionaires, the athletes, the people that really essentially move and shake the world. I mean, there's some historical things that we can say make us that, we've been disposable by systemical practices, but if without Black people, this world doesn't turn the way it do. That's how I feel, right? And so the impact And now people, hip hop culture, everything black, real black, African American black is embraced and bought and purchased. The idea of cool is about y'all, and y'all invented that. You know what I mean? And that's something that's sold all over the world. And people want to make it what it is, but you know what it is, right? And so I think about, man, now y'all have an opportunity to come back to a space where people who look like you want to see that, and you can show them like this is who we are, we're back. And so I want that for my brothers and sisters. I want them to at least have the option to be able to have, instead of just being forced in a one-way direction to America, but you have an opportunity to say, okay, look, I want to go back. I want to invest. I want to do other things. I don't want to have to just relegate myself to feeling like I have to just be here. And this is only where, if I choose to, cool. But I also want people to know that there's another part. You can have, other people got other homes, summer homes. You can go, and you should have the opportunity to also be global citizens, because other people feel like they can do that. And I feel like, we should be able to as Black people as well. So, bro, if that's something that you are looking at doing, I strongly support and encourage, and whatever I can do to help assist in that, for you and for your own personal knowledge, but also for your baby girl on the way. I want to assist in that in any way. And so, I appreciate you sharing that and being transparent. And even just thinking about, like, I was gonna mention and transition a little bit into sports because I know that's your arena. And so, I mean, that's something like I saw an article that led me to one day interview Sam Acho, who I know you're, but it was an article talking about the potential rise of like African or children of African immigrants, if not African immigrants, in sports. And bro, I know you're really, I mean, you tap into all sport, but I know you're really heavy in the NBA. And like, if you really take a step back and really look at the amount of African immigrants in sports now, or even children of African second generation, it's immense, right? And so, I mean, they're stars now. Ayo, like Giannis is Nigerian, right? You got Bam, you got I can name them all. Vincent, like, there's so many people that are in the sports now that are of these diasporic descent, right? And so I'm curious as to what your thoughts are about this, because not only now are they just, okay, they have the name, but they're also bringing the culture into the mix. They're bringing it into the sports, right? NFL Africa, Cleveland Browns are doing a great job, really, and bringing into the Ghanaian, demonstration. Minnesota Vikings, with having a Ghanaian GM, right? And so, like, there's so much more of that diasporic pride that's being shown. Even your own colleague, Jason Goff, right? Like, he talks about his, I'm going to Belize. That's where his friend is from. People's from. He's going there every summer, every time you're talking about it, right? Or even, showing it on Instagram. So, like, I'm curious as to what your thoughts now that you're in this profession, you're seeing it, and you're seeing this diversity and Blackness, just rear its head. Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think, sports in the truest sense is the great equalizer, where if you're talented, no matter where you're from or how you started, people will find you and they will want you to play for them.
Yeah.
And it's one of the only spaces, equal opportunity spaces in the world is in sports. And I think, that's probably why I gravitated towards it. One, as a child, because if you're good, you're gonna get picked, and people will embrace you, in that manner. And the same thing when in sports coverage, if you're entertaining and people like you, you're respectable to people. People want you around. They want to interview you. Like in this case, they want you to work for them. So it's really an equal, as close as you can get to an equal opportunity. And the NBA is using that as definitely an example of that. I think it is. One, I think the NBA has made an effort to be a worldwide sport, to make it as easy as they can for people to pick up a basketball and a hoop and find some place to play with some friends. And we're seeing the effects of that now. We're seeing what the Dream Team did, for the future of basketball, across the world, and specifically in Africa. You just recently, right? Luol Deng
Yeah.
and South Sudan, right? They're gonna have the opportunity to play in the Olympics. They will qualify for the Olympics. Like they just kind of started like a few years ago. That's crazy. That's insane. And then you have a two-time MVP in Giannis, who obviously hails from Greece, but is a product of African immigrants. Joel Embiid, even though he's not playing for his home country, he chose to play for Team USA. He still has roots there. He is known as an international player. You really see the impact of what happens when you give everybody an opportunity.
Yeah.
And the opportunity could be difficult or more difficult for some than others. But if you are truly talented, people will find you no matter where you are in sports. And it's the best thing about sports is you're going to get a different spin. We haven't seen a player like Giannis before. We would have never seen it if basketball never got to, his home. We've never seen a player like Embiid who's pushing 3 bills, but that can step out and shoot the 3 and still have so much finesse a part of his game. We would have never gotten that if basketball didn't reach where, he was from. You got DeAndre Ayton and Tim Duncan from, the Jamaica and then the islands.
Yeah.
So like on the diaspora, basketball is reaching, everywhere, and sport is reaching everywhere. We know how popular soccer, football is, around the world, that everybody plays it. And, you see the, me and Jason Goff, when we talk about soccer or international soccer, we look at these teams, France, and it's like, this is Black people all
African, bro. They all
right,
African.
Germany, or these other places, and it's like it's all us. This is all us, everywhere. So sports has been a great equalizer, like I mentioned at the beginning of this very long diatribe. But yeah, it's so good to see, because it is entertaining, right? Like, to know that the level of play in each various sport is being raised because of the pool is being widened. Right? There's more competition. That means people got to step up their game to be better, because now it's not just a select group of people that you get to choose from. You get to choose from anybody around the world to draft for your various team or to sign to your various team. And I hope that just continues to be the case, and I hope that continues to grow.
Yeah, I mean, NFL got their pathway program, OC Onyemura. How am I saying it? Yeah, OC Onyemura. I should know that he's Igbo, but yeah, OC's kicking off the NFL Africa thing, creating the pathways. Not every player from Africa has an opportunity to be, at least a training camp. If they work hard, they get it. And I think, man, everything you said was well said, bro. As far as we're everywhere. I mean, especially when we talk about Blackness, and that's the crazy thing. So that's what hit me when we think about these Black transnationalists, when it's like, you got all these Black people in all parts of the world, but to some degree, they're all connected in some way back to Africa or to some country in the diaspora. That this is where I'm from. Black people in London, from Jamaica, they're from the islands, right? And so it's like there's that. We got the roots, but then y'all got the branches are everywhere, and they're creating impact all over the world in entertainment and sports, right? And man, the only piece is missing right now is baseball, bro. And that's my I love baseball. I'm a Sox fan. I gotta talk about that. It's not this podcast, but like, but like, diehard Sox fan, and like that was something that I always, outside of Akil Adu, he was the first one, the one in Detroit. But like that was always my dream. Like the only sport I played was baseball. Mama didn't let me play football. Basketball, I was only defense. Like I couldn't shoot more. So like couldn't play. I love defensive rebound, but I knew but baseball was my sport, right? And so, but I always realized that there weren't people who look like me, who talk like me, and then their issue when we talk about people from like who are Latino, from Cuba, or Dominican Republic, right? There's a different conversation how they view blackness, but yeah, like so that was a piece that I always was like, man, I cannot wait until we have that potential breakthrough because it'd be really interesting to see. And that's one thing I'm hoping that I can at some point in the future be able to contribute to really creating more exposure to the game of baseball for like more African or Black diasporan like athletes. Because I realize like once we get in that space, the issue, of course, with baseball is that like it takes time. Like when you're coming from when you're in the mud and when you're trying to get out the mud, you don't really got that much time because baseball is an expensive sport, right? And you're minor league, you ain't getting paid that much. You really got people at home you got to take care of. So the barriers in place really make it difficult. But I really do think that like that would be one potential, like that's what I'm like praying that I can be able to live to see is more African or just Black diasporans like really making an impact in the game of baseball because I just don't see it for hockey. But like,
that might be a wash.
I don't see that for hockey, bro. But yeah, man. So look, I appreciate the time you've taken already, man. More than enough. I know you're a busy man, and so again, I can't express enough how just my gratitude for you taking the time to do this and wrap me for a little bit. But I do have one last question before we wrap up. So when it's all said and done, man, like you're encroaching new phases in your life. You just mentioned just how rooted you are, and you've had really positive Black male influences. You've been exposed to sports, right? You've really been able to you walk by faith. You're a man of God, and I want to know at the end of the day, with everything you're doing, what do you want your legacy to be?
I think that has changed more recently. I used to think about that a lot, and before when I was younger, I'm like, ah, man, I want to leave stuff here, and so I kind of do a yearly kind of podcast. I don't really promote it, but just kind of like a tape conversations with people in my life that I can pass down to my daughter. She can listen to and stuff in that nature. Where I interview my father, and I want her because she's only going to know old man version of me and my father. So I want her to hear um, in their own voices now while they're
Wow.
poignant and smart and able to talk about things and their feelings in their relative primes.
Yeah.
So she can always have that, and my children can always have that, um, and as well as the old man versions that she'll be introduced to when she's born. So I'm still doing that, and I'm still going to do that going forward. And I looked at that and I was like, well, that's not really important. Like the internet is gonna fade, and all these other things are gonna fade, man. And the more I grow um, in my faith, man, I just want people to know that I'm a follower of Jesus, man.
Mm.
Um, any of that's nothing more that I can do, right? If I may not be the most famous person in the world, I may not have, my name written, in somebody's Hall of Fame, or I may not get a statue, you know, um, somewhere. But if I can introduce my children and people that know me and enjoy me, enjoy my work, whatever, I really want to point people to Jesus. That's it. That's it. That's what I want my legacy, to be. And if I can pass that down, whatever my children decide to do with that, that's ultimately what I want to, because it's their choice in the end. I just want to point people to Him, and I can't really ask for much more than that. I don't have a say so right after I'm dead of what people think about me or feel about me. I only can be the best, person that I can be, and I only can do that uh, through Him.
Yeah.
and ultimately that's kind of what I want. And the more I think about it, of how I used to think about, man, I need to attain a certain level of success so I can, leave a bunch of stuff or leave a good name uh, behind. It felt more vain to me
Mm,
as I truly understood what mattered, and it felt more feeble uh, because people, you can imagine, right? Like, and the more I thought about it, it was like it only takes like 2 generations, right? Once my kids have a kid, are they really going to care about what I did, or who I was, or things of that nature? So after my daughter was born, right, like, and she has her family, like, I'm not going to be brought up in. It would be super selfish. Hey, make sure you mention me. Like,
right.
they got their own lives to live. Um, so I can't depend on my successes to be my legacy. And if that's all that there is of my legacy, I don't think that that's really a good legacy. So the only thing that I can do, and the only thing that I want, is to point people to Jesus Christ, and that's it.
Mm. Yeah, that's real, bro. I appreciate that. And that is and you was as you were saying that I felt that um because when you talk about it being 2 generations, that is a real thing. And like
Hmm.
you're not that far removed from being a past thought, right? And
Hmm.
so living in the moment, living today, and just like you said, doing your best to lead by faith and live by faith, and again, be a good representative and disciple of Christ is that's one thing to behold, bro. So yeah, bro. Thank you so much again
Hmm.
for hopping on the show and really just and rapping with us. And I always wanted to, because again, on this podcast, it's I wanted to get a perspective of someone who is really new to the content of just talking about African immigrants, because I'm so deep
Hmm.
in the struggle. Like
Yeah.
I need a breath of fresh air, man. So
Uh-huh.
thank you again for jumping on the show. And how can people, contact you, follow you, if there are any other
Hmm.
things you're working on, because for me, again, like I said, I've been following you, Jason Goff, Lawrence Holmes. I mean, especially like Lawrence, uh,
Hmm.
man, God, like I said, I've been listening to 670 since I was a shorty, 11 years old.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I hope one day to interview Lawrence as well,
Hmm.
and even Jason, when but like
Hmm.
the impact that they had on me. You talk about what you were doing and like not being able to like get into trouble, and like
Hmm.
like when I was at home and I sat and listened to sports radio. I listened to
Hmm.
670, which is unorthodox for the other kids in my neighborhood living up in
Yeah.
North when I moved to the South Side. But like I listened to me and Z show, and I listened to
Hmm.
all those things, and and Dan Jiggets and and so like to hear Black men who love sports and are as passionate about it as I am,
Hmm.
that kept me on a straight and narrow for a minute. Like I didn't
Hmm.
really want to do anything else. I just wanted to talk sports, listen to other people talk sports, watch my sports teams.
Hmm.
And so like hats off to all y'all that really made us feel included. We heard it in y'all voices. We heard it in the scenarios and the anecdotes that y'all shared when y'all were talking behind the scenes. There were some things that we knew, like, oh, that's a brother. Like
Yeah.
you just had you could that's a brother, and so you
Yeah.
want to check it
Hmm.
out again. And so sometimes you wouldn't have to, even because back then it wasn't like we was really running social media. So if I didn't
Right.
catch a picture in a in a newspaper or see you in an
Hmm.
ad,
You don't
I'm
know.
just right. I didn't know, what I mean? So,
Right.
but I could tell by the way we talk. There were certain
Hmm.
nuances in our language that I don't. And sometimes you may underestimate the impact, bro. But even at you as a producer and what you were doing,
Hmm.
bro, like again, my hats off, you know, to you, proverbially. And so thank you again for even just again answering my DMs. And I was just like, bro, like I was just shooting, because shooters shoot. I was just like, I was just shooting, man. I was just shooting, man. I was like, listen, see if homie gonna hit
Hmm.
me back. And so for you to hit me up and take the time, bro, like I said, God bless you and everything. More blessings to you and your family. I wish you
Thank you.
nothing
Thank you.
but just everything that you just said. And I wish
Hmm.
your daughter is gonna realize just the amazing man that is her dad, and the lineage of great men
Hmm.
and upstanding men that she come from, man. So Thank you so much for being on the show. So again, my point was, how can people follow you?
So yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at the Tony Gill, on Twitter and Instagram and Threads if that's your thing. I don't really go there, but you know, if that's your thing, or you can email me, anthonygill56 at gmail.com. That's Gill with 2 L's. And yeah, you know, if you want to see what I got going on, that's where you can find me.
All right, man. Thanks a lot, bro. Really appreciate it.
All right, no problem.